Despite being a saga for children, Toy Story had several confirmed deaths, and some of them were indeed quite brutal. So today, we are going to look at the worst deaths in the entire Toy Story franchise, plus several characters who disappeared and most likely did not make it alive to Toy Story 5. Combat Carl. Throughout Toy Story, we have seen several versions of Combat Carl. The most well-known is probably the one that appeared in Toy Story of Terror, but the first Combat Carl we saw had a completely different story. In the first Toy Story movie from 1995, Sid Phillips ties a rocket to Combat Carl's back, lights it up, and sends him flying into 1,000 pieces. The movie only shows us the explosion, and after that, we never see anything of that Combat Carl again. So this was the first confirmed death of the entire franchise, the fly that died on Buzz's visor. In this same movie, another death appears that lasts less than 1 second and almost nobody remembers. After Woody throws Buzz out the window, Buzz manages to get onto Andy's mom's car to chase him and take revenge. But when he enters through the sunroof, we can see that a fly crashed into his helmet's visor and was completely squashed. And yes, it is dead because even its belly guts came out. Basically, Buzz's helmet ended up working like a car's windshield. Buster. Do you remember Buster? The dachshund they gave Andy for Christmas at the end of the first movie. At that time, Buster was most likely around 3 months old. In Toy Story 2, we already saw him as an adult dog of approximately 2 years. But by Toy Story 3, he was already a senior dog, he had a hard time walking, he had gained quite a lot of weight, and he would be approximately 12 years old. In Toy Story 4, he did not appear because he stayed living with Andy's mom, but by then, he should already be around 13 years old. That means that by Toy Story 5, Buster would be reaching 15. A dachshund usually lives between 12 and 16 years. This depends on their size and the care they are given. And taking into account the state in which we saw Buster since Toy Story 3, the most likely thing is that by Toy Story 5, he would have already passed away. So leave your like and your comment in the name of Andy's faithful friend, Scud, Sid's dog. And if Buster probably already died, the one who definitely did not make it to Toy Story 5 was Scud, Sid Phillips' dog. Scud was already an adult dog since the first movie. We do not know exactly how old he was, but even if he was barely turning 2 or 3, by Toy Story 5 he would already be around 17 or 18 years old. So Scud would also be extremely dead from old age long before the 5th movie began, the toys that Sid destroyed. But the dogs were not the only victims related to Sid Phillips. Sid did not only mistreat his toys, the boy entertained himself by performing operations, swapping their heads, tearing off their parts, and putting together the remains of several toys to build a new one. One of the clearest examples is Janie, his sister Hannah's doll. Sid takes off her head and swaps it for a pterodactyl's as part of what he calls a double brain transplant. But Janie and the pterodactyl did not die. Later on, the mutant toys put their heads back on the correct bodies and both participate in the plan to save Woody and Buzz. The same thing happens with Babyface, Ducky, Legs, Roller Bob, and the other mutant toys. Although they are missing parts and are built with pieces of other toys, they are all still alive. In fact, they are the ones who help repair Sid's most recent victims. The ones that do seem to have ended up dead are the toys that were left completely disassembled inside his room. On Sid's lamp, we can see several doll heads separated from their bodies. They never move or help the others, nor do they appear again when all the toys rise up against Sid. So while the mutant toys managed to survive with new parts, those dolls on the lamp were probably other victims of Sid's operations that could no longer be repaired. Sid Phillips. And since we are talking so much about Sid Phillips, we have to mention the death that many believe Pixar hid in Coco. In Toy Story 3, we see Sid again working as a garbage collector. We know it is him because he still wears the same black t-shirt with a skull that he had when he was a boy. He also has longer hair, headphones, and goes along making music with the trash cans. Years later in Coco, a musician appears in the land of the dead wearing a t-shirt with exactly the same skull as Sid. He also has long hair, and Pixar never said that it is Sid. So the t-shirt might also just be a reference, but because of the clothes, the hair, and the connection of both characters with music, the theory was created that Sid Phillips died at some point after Toy Story 3 and ended up appearing as a skeleton in Coco. So it is not a confirmed death, but if this character from Coco really is Sid, at least we know he dedicated himself to music and not to being a serial killer. Wheezy. In Toy Story 2, we met Wheezy, the penguin who practically started the whole movie. At first, he was completely sad because his squeaker no longer worked and he knew Andy's mom was going to sell him in the yard sale. Woody manages to rescue him. Andy repairs him, and in the end, it seems that everything turned out well for him. But in Toy Story 3, we did not see him again. Nor did he appear in the 4th or 5th movie. So what happened to Wheezy? Due to his shape and the sound he made, Wheezy looks like one of those squeaky toys for dogs. One of the theories is that he ended up in another yard sale. Someone bought him as a toy for their pet, and their dog ended up destroying him. Maybe it was not Buster, but after so many years with how fragile he already was since Toy Story 2, Wheezy would have very hardly survived until the 5th movie. What do you guys think happened to him? Gary, do you remember Gary, the old man who fixes Woody in Toy Story 2? Well, as a fun fact, he is the same old man who stars in the Pixar short Gary's Game, where he plays a game of chess against himself. When he appeared in Toy Story 2, Gary already seemed to be between 65 and 70 years old. If we take into account the years that pass until Toy Story 5, by then he would already be reaching or would have even passed 80. Furthermore, in Toy Story 4, a photograph of him appears behind the counter of the antique store. This made many think that Margaret, the owner of the store, could be his wife and that Gary had worked there restoring objects before he died. The photograph does not confirm that he died, but it does make it clear that Gary had some connection to the store. And due to his age, it is very likely that by Toy Story 5 he had already passed away and that photo was one of the memories he left inside the place. Zurg's fake death. We also have the supposed deleted death of Zurg in Toy Story 2, although here we must clarify well what happened. During the fight on the elevator, Rex accidentally hits Zurg and makes him fall from an enormous height. For a few minutes, the movie wants us to think that he died, but later we know that he is still alive and returns with the "I am your father" joke. Apparently, there was going to be a version in which Zurg was going to die, but this was going to be very dark for the audience, so that is why they changed the final version. Andy's dad. Many have wondered why Andy never had a dad present in any of the movies. For years, a story circulated in which Andy's dad had been the original owner of Woody. According to that version, he got sick with polio when he was a boy. He kept Woody throughout his whole life, and before dying, he gave him to his son. The theory became very popular because it had supposedly been told by Joe Ranft, one of the writers at Pixar. However, Andrew Stanton, who also wrote the first movie, said that the story was a complete lie. So the death of Andy's dad from polio is not part of the official story. But Pixar has not explained what really happened to him either. So many still believe that he died before the events of the first movie. Sammy Salamander. In Toy Story 5, we met Sammy Salamander, Bonnie's pet. But when Woody asks if it is the same Sammy he knew from the other toys, they explain to him that in reality, it is Sammy Salamander number 2. Sammy Salamander number 1 died before the movie began. So that is another confirmed death within the saga. Later on, when the toys discover that their plastic hands do not work on the lil pad screen, they grab Sammy number 2 and use one of his paws to control it. But later, they let go of him and Sammy escapes into the vegetation. Sammy number 2 does not die in that scene. The last thing we see is that he managed to escape. However, during the credits, a Sammy Salamander number 3 already appears. This does not confirm that the second one has died. So the most logical thing is that Bonnie never managed to get him back after he escaped and simply replaced him with another one. But either way, in a short time, Bonnie had already lost 2 different salamanders, and taking into account that a salamander can live from 5 to 30 years when well cared for, that tells us that Bonnie is a terrible pet owner. Buzz's death in Game Boy Color. And to finish, we have an honorable mention that not everyone knows about. In the Toy Story 2 video game for Game Boy Color, when the player loses all their lives, an animation appears of Buzz lying on the floor along with 2 batteries. The game itself explains that Buzz ran out of energy. His body is left completely collapsed and he can no longer move. So it basically shows us what his death would be like if someday his batteries ran out forever. Obviously, it is not an official death within the movies, but it is one of the few times that the franchise has directly shown us how Buzz Lightyear could die. And now tell me, which of all these deaths had you not noticed? And what other character do you think also did not make it alive to Toy Story 5?